I will call this hybrid meeting of the House Ways and Means Committee for May 17th to order. This hearing is taking place pursuant to Rule 10.01 and can be viewed through the House webcast. Ms. Anna, please take the roll.
Chair Moran.
Present.
Moran present. Vice Chair Olson.
Present.
Olson present. Representative Garofalo. Representative Albright.
Present.
Albright present. Representative Becker-Finn.
Present.
Becker-Finn present. Representative Bernardi.
Present.
Bernardi present. Representative Eklund.
Present.
Eklund present. Representative Hansen.
Hansen present.
Hansen present. Representative Hassan. Representative Hertas.
Hertas present.
Hertas present. Representative Hornstein.
Ornstein present.
Hornstein present. Representative Johnson.
Present.
Johnson present. Representative Grisha.
Grisha present.
Grisha present. Representative Liebling.
Present.
Liebling present. Representative Lilly. Representative Mariani excused. Representative Marquardt.
Marquardt present.
Marquardt present. Representative Miller.
Present.
Miller present. Representative Nash.
Present.
Nash present. Representative Nelson.
Nelson present.
Nelson present. Representative Noor.
Noor present.
Noor present. Representative O'Neill.
Present.
O'Neill present. Representative Pulaski.
Pulaski present.
Pulaski present. Representative Petersburg.
Present.
Petersburg present. Representative Pinto.
Pinto present.
Pinto present. Representative Schumacher.
Schumacher present.
Schumacher present. Representative Schultz.
Schultz present.
Schultz present. Representative Scott.
Present.
Scott present. Representative Sundin.
Sundin present.
Sundin present. And Representative Garofalo.
Present.
Garofalo is present. Madam Chair, there is a quorum.
Lily is present.
Oh, Lily present.
So a quorum is present. Our first agenda item is approval of the minutes from our previous hearing. The meetings were provided in the members' packets and posted online. Vice Chair Olson, can I get a motion to approve the minutes for May 4th, 2022?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Are there any questions or corrections to those minutes? If not, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion prevails and the minutes are approved. So members, we have two bills on the agenda. And since a number of conference committees will be meeting at 1, we have a goal to complete our work by 12:45. So before we get to the bills on the agenda, we need to make one additional adjustment to the budget resolution. Vice Olson, can you please assume the chair?
Happy to, Madam Chair. So I will bring the 2022 budget resolution coded BUD Res 04-3 back before the committee. And Chair Moran, when you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Vice Chair Olson. So members, I move the amendment coded Buzz Res 04-3A01. So the A01 amendment is very simple. What it does is it increases the net general fund spending number on line 4 by $41.714 million. This amount reflects the general fund impact of House File 4649 if it is passed by the voters at the 2022 general election. Although the fiscal note for House File 4649 indicate a zero fiscal impact to state agencies because the outcome of the vote on the constitutional amendment is yet unknown, I believe Ms. Adrian has advised me that our budget rules require us to track potential fiscal costs of this nature. So that's why we're taking this extra step this afternoon. So I would defer to Ms. Adrian if she has anything to add, but I ask for your support.
Ms. Adrians, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. No, I think Chair Moran explained it perfectly.
Okay, so the A01 amendment is before us. Are there any questions or discussion to the amendment to the budget resolution? Seeing no discussion, I'm going to give it
Madam
one more
Chair.
pause. Is there someone in the room with a hand up?
Representative O'Neill.
Oh, excuse me. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering how you were going to see us here.
I do have help in the room, eyes in the room who are getting to me in a different way, but go ahead, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does this new budget resolution reflect the global agreement of 444?
Yeah, well,
Representative Moran.
thank you, Madam Speaker. So Representative O'Neill, there's a lot of in-session moving pieces right now, but the Senate is also moving a similar proposal through their committee process. So we are matching the pace, and leaders are tracking the bills in both bodies for consideration in any agreement.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So would we expect to meet again if that global agreement becomes more solidified?
Chair Moran.
Madam Speaker and Representative O'Neill, if it comes, we will come back and speak to it. Was that your
Representative
question?
O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what does this leave us on the bottom line?
Chair Moran.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative O'Neill. Can someone, okay, Ms. Adrian, where did that leave us?
Ms. Adrian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies. It just took me 1 minute to pull it up. So with the addition of the fiscal impact for House File 4649, that leaves just under $950 million in the fiscal year 22-23 biennium.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know we don't have a tails target, but that again puts us overspending when you look at the structural balance moving forward at 6.1 billion. So just a note, we are now out of balance. If we had tail targets, which we don't. And we don't even really have solidified global agreements, so
Right, correct.
a lot is in flux right now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative O'Neill.
Further discussion or questions? I'll give it a minute if someone in the room so I can be notified. Okay, seeing no further discussion in the room or online. So all those in favor of well, let me say that Budget Resolution 04-3A01 amendment is before us. So we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
No.
No.
The motion prevails and the amendment to the budget resolution is adopted.
Well, thank you, members. So the next item on the agenda is House File 4649 regarding the renewal and modification of Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. Welcome to the committee, Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that there is an author's amendment that I'd like to offer.
Yes, so members, while this bill came to us from the Rules Committee, no, not yet.
I'll make a call.
So I will move it. I move that House File 4649 be recommended for referral to the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. I think there's also an A2 amendment. Vice Chair Olson, would you like to move the A2 amendment for the author?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move the A2 amendment.
Okay. So Representative Hollins, can you please explain the amendments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members. The A2 amendment is fairly simple. What it does is change the amount that's appropriated from the Environmental and Natural Resources Trust Fund each year of the biennium. Currently, it is up to 5.5%, and this change would make it up to 7%. So it's pretty technical, it's fairly simple, and I know that we have House staff online also if folks have questions about the finances.
Are there any questions to the A2 amendment? Representative O'Neill.
Can she talk about how that changes the fiscal note?
So, is Mr. Hagemeyer online?
Madam Chair, I am. I
Did you hear the
can help
question from
address that if you'd like.
Did you hear the question from Representative O'Neill?
Madam Chair, I did.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Neill, so the amendment changes line 2.2 of the bill from 5.5% of the market value of the fund on June 30th prior to the start of the biennium to 7% of the market value of the fund on June 30th, 1 year prior to the start of the biennium. So there's kind of a lag issue here, so we don't know the exact number. Basically, that calculation will be made on June 30th of this year for fiscal years 24 and 25. And then if this were adopted by the voters in November of this year, I believe all the sections take effect January 1st of 2023. So the first calculation where this would be incorporated at the 7%, with my understanding, would be on the June 30th, 2024 calculation for fiscal years 26 and 27. So it's beyond the tails biennium, but it would increase that percentage that's allocated annually by 1.5%. We don't know the exact number because it's based on the market value of the fund on June 30th of 2024. So it's kind of a little bit out there for knowing what that value would be. I can say the market value of the fund right now, as of April 30th of 2022, is right now at 1.533 billion. So if you were to use that number, it is roughly 23 million. However, that value obviously will change by a little over 2 years from now, and then it'd be 1.5% of whatever value that is.
Representative O'Neill.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And so what is the reason for this change?
Representative Hollins, to you. The questions from Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative O'Neill. Yeah, this change it's been asked for by the stakeholders who, the coalition, who tend to have access to this fund and who appropriate this fund. And the increase has been asked to happen to address the current environmental crisis, and hopefully also provide some funding to address environmental justice needs that are happening within our communities.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So environmental justice. Okay, thank you.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the author, you stated that the increase is necessary for environmental justice, but you're expanding the scope to include housing. So can you account for that?
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Garofalo. Yes, we can certainly discuss that further when we get into the bill, the meat of the bill. But my understanding is this increase in appropriation is not, particularly dedicated to environmental justice. These are just needs that have been identified by environmental and natural resource preservation groups that they would like to work towards and do more work in. So the increase is really, it's not simply environmental justice, it's also addressing the environmental crisis that we find ourselves in a variety of different avenues.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Hollins. So besides the environmental crisis, the environmental justice and housing, what else is expanded under this amendment?
Representative Hollins.
That is all.
Thank you.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Hollins. Those are pretty broad terms. Can you give us just a couple examples of what environmental justice would look like and what the current, you said we're in an environmental crisis. What is that?
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Miller. The environmental crisis, I did not define this as an environmental crisis. This is coming from the organizations that work with this money and work with this fund. My understanding is, the uses of this in the environment work is incredibly broad. And so to my mind, it could include everything from chronic wasting disease that we're seeing an increase in, to the removal of diseased trees, to preservation of natural resource spaces for people to be able to hunt and fish in. I mean, the coalition that has presented previously on this bill is incredibly broad, and they work in a wide array of different areas. So I think it would be incredibly difficult to pinpoint exactly what this particular increase in funds would be used for. But we know that we know that our temperatures overall are increasing. We know that environment and natural spaces are under threat from a variety of different avenues. And so being able to have additional access to the funds would be useful for all of these organizations.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Madam Chair and Representative Hollins, this is Ways and Means, and this is a pretty significant bill that's being presented here. And maybe this is more for the floor. If this comes to discussion, it certainly will come as discussion as this is campaigned if it becomes a constitutional question. But to use these broad terms and to say, well, kind of the everyone knows and we're going to find out what we need to spend this on is not exactly a responsibility, or is not exactly responsible for this committee, really the legislature, but certainly this committee when we're talking about approving a great deal more of money for some broad terms as environmental justice, environmental crisis, and everyone, kind of knows the crisis that we're in. We don't know that. And everything points to sort of statements. I guess the best I could do is vote no on this, but this should be a real concern that the legislature is kind of advancing some pretty significant things. And we're just generalizing that we don't know how this money is going to be spent. We just know it's going to be spent on important things. That's a problem for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe, it's important, and I want to applaud Representative Hollins for her work on this. And that members, we've voted on bills that have left the floor already that have had definitions of environmental justice in them. And you can go to the MPCA agency website or look at the federal government and definitions of environmental justice. But there are areas of our state and areas of our country where there is a history of more pollution. And those areas line up where there may be people who are disadvantaged because of their background or race or their economic status. And so serving on the LCCMR that reviews these requests for proposals, and so on the spending of this, it's competitive. And it's scored, the projects are scored based on criteria. And that criteria is published, and we traveled around the state getting input from Minnesotans, wherever they were, as to what should be the important components that we look at. And that strategic planning is required every 5 years. I think particularly with the amendment that Representative Hollins has done, it recognizes that we are not in 1988 or not 1990 anymore, that the needs are greater, the changes that are occurring with our climate as well as our water quality and as well as environmental justice. Back when the Constitutional Amendment was first passed, the words environmental justice probably weren't spoken in this Capitol. But I can assure you they are going to continue to be talked about in the years to come as we recognize this history. So I'd ask you to support Representative Hollins' bill because it recognizes the Minnesota of the next 25 years, and it provides the flexibility through a competitive process where we can respond annually to some of those demands. We're not in a static position where we can't move. We don't have the flexibility to move to respond to crises as they occur. So I would encourage your support. We have a procedure that's worked, but the world has also changed, and we need to change with it.
Thank you. Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Hansen, and I just want to address Representative Miller's concerns. I think Representative Hansen really touched on this fairly well, but I want to reiterate that, and I don't want to conflate the amendment with the actual bill, but the amendment is increasing the amount that is accessible by the LCCMR to make those decisions. And it's the same process that's been used since 1988. So we're not simply funding without any knowledge or process things that are undefined. This is a process that has been in place, and projects that are incredibly well vetted and that frankly benefit the entire state of Minnesota widely, you know, from natural resources to water quality to air quality, you know, as I said, hunting and fishing. I mean, and these are all vetted by the LCCMR. So it's not that we're just throwing money at some amorphous concept. Somebody applies for this grant funds and it gets vetted by an entire, you know, well-balanced, nonpartisan team to decide how that money is going to be spent. So even if we are saying in this committee here that it is to address the environmental crisis, it's still going to be vetted by members of the legislature, by appointees of the governor, by people from both sides of the party. And so I think that's incredibly important when we think about this. This really is something that the vast majority of Minnesotans are on board with, and garners a lot of support. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Beckerfin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And when in doubt, go read the bill. So line 1.17, this isn't just going to some general amorphous categories. It's going to protection, conservation, preservation, and enhancement of the state's air, water, land, fish, wildlife, and other natural resources, and for addressing climate change. That's almost exactly what is currently law. And then in the housing space, if you go to line 3.23, may be spent only to provide housing, improve housing affordability, and increase homeownership, including but not limited to building and refurbishing affordable housing, mitigating resident displacement, improving housing conditions, providing climate resilient and sustainable housing, and reducing harmful environment and health impacts related to housing. I would hope that we can all agree that those are good goals to work towards. So that specifically is where the money is going to go.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question to the author. If this amendment is engrossed into the bill, is it similarly being handled in the Senate? And if not, my question would be to the chair of the committee as to why we're entertaining this last week of the session when it has no chance of becoming law if it's not.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Nash. My understanding is that this is being brought to the Senate, the same proposal, and the coalition around this proposal that has suggested it has brought it to the Senate. They have a final committee hearing. I believe it's scheduled for this Thursday. And so I anticipate it being adopted.
Okay, Representative Nash. It is moving through the Senate. Representative Nash.
Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Representative O'Neill.
That's fine. We can just pass the amendment and then
Okay.
we'll speak to the bill at large.
Okay. Seeing no further questions about the A2 amendment, all those in favor of the A2 amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
No.
The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Representative Hollins, House File 4649 as amended is before you. Can you please tell us about the bill?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members. I think we've gone a little bit into the weeds on this bill already, but I am happy to give a little more background for folks who maybe aren't as familiar with it. So it is to reauthorize the environmental. It is to reauthorize the Environment and Natural Resource Trust Fund, which is set to expire in 2024. In 1988, the legislature passed a constitutional amendment to create a state lottery with some of the proceeds going to fund initiatives for clean water, wildlife conservation, land use, and air quality. And this bill would reauthorize that measure and put the ballot question to the voters this year in 2022. As we mentioned previously, the goal of the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund is to provide long-term, consistent, and stable source of funding for activities that protect, conserve, preserve, and enhance Minnesota's air, water, land, fish, wildlife, and other natural resources. I think since 1991, this fund has provided approximately $875 million, to 1,800 projects around the state. And funds have gone to all different parts of the state, and especially greater Minnesota, frankly, because there's more natural resources and space there that need protecting. In addition to that, there is the bill creates a housing fund to provide housing and address housing affordability. This fund would not touch the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. It would consist of the other 50% of the lottery proceeds funds, which currently go into the general fund. It directs the creation of a housing council to advise the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency on how to spend the money from the housing funds that are consistent with the law, with the state constitution and the state law. And recommendations must be submitted to the commissioner of the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency for consideration, and requires a supermajority of the votes of that council. And when making recommendations, in particular, the council must give priority to projects that build or preserve housing that's affordable to household incomes at or below 30% of the area median income. I will tell you that overall, this the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund is a widely popular provision. When polled previously, 77, I believe, % of voters were in favor of it. And so, and that's across the entire state of Minnesota. So we do believe that this is a very important aspect of simply being a Minnesotan, is protecting the beautiful land and lakes that we love in our space. I am happy to answer any questions that folks have about this, and I will do my very best.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Representative Hollins. So members, for your reference, the fiscal, the revised fiscal note on this bill is in your package. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to the author, you said quite emphatically that this money, the change that you did in your amendment, was for environmental justice and to address the environmental crisis. But nowhere in the language to the voters does it say those words at all. And I think that maybe you want to amend that so that they know exactly what your intent is, because we often, you know, what an author's intent is incredibly important. Sometimes courts go back and look at what was said, and your words don't quite match the words now that will be before the voters. So if that's actually your intent, is to have environmental justice, to deal with the environmental crisis as part of the language, it's not there. So I'm wondering if you're going to amend that.
Was that a question, Representative O'Neill? Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not my intention to, my current intention to amend that, primarily because we, I'm looking for the section of the bill, but we do specifically say it's to protect drinking water sources, water quality of lakes, rivers, streams, forests, and address climate change. So I think that that is pretty widely covered. I don't know, without a definition of a crisis, I don't know that that needs to be changed in the language that's going to the community, that's going to the voters. I believe that, and also because I believe that the LCCMR is going to make those decisions and vet those projects that are being submitted, just as they always have. So I don't anticipate there being a need to amend the language.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, words are important, and when we asked you about the amendment, you said emphatically that it was to deal with environmental justice, and I think that it is only fair to tell the voters that that is what they are in fact voting on. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Hollins, I believe that you're on the Preventing Homelessness Committee, is that correct?
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Representative Scott, that is correct.
Okay,
Representative
thank you,
Scott.
Madam Chair. And I know that in the housing realm and in the preventing homelessness realm, there's often a discussion about what causes it, what can we do to make housing more affordable, what can we do to prevent homelessness. And I'm looking specifically at the paragraph now that starts on page 3.19 and that following paragraph. And I'm concerned that this housing council is going to be looking at things such as improve housing affordability and increase home ownership, including but not limited to building and refurbishing affordable housing, mitigating resident displacement, improving housing conditions, providing climate resilient and sustainable housing, and reducing harmful environmental and health impacts related to housing. And I know it says including but not limited to, but one of the major discussions always around this topic is the topic of regulation and code. And there are numerous studies out there that show us, just even going across the border to Wisconsin, that you save 20% on a house just because of the cost that that's baked into the price of a home in Minnesota, just because of regulation and codes. And so, Representative Hollins, I wondered if you could address the absence of that language in this, and do you yourself believe that those codes, adding 20% to the cost of a house as compared to our neighbors in Wisconsin, is that a factor in your mind?
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Scott. I mean, I think you bring up a really interesting question, and I think it's one that we have grappled with as lawmakers for a long time. And we know that not only are there regulations that have made it difficult, but also, municipal rules and ordinances that are creating virtual prohibitions for a number of new homeowners, depending on where they would like to live. And that really end up becoming a bit of a redlining situation for a lot of new home buyers who are unable to move to the neighborhoods they would like to because of those costs. And so I do think that's something that needs to be addressed. I don't know that this bill is the way to address it, especially because this is a fund as opposed to a policy decision that's being made. The money that we're looking at here is approximately, my understanding is approximately $70 million a year that would be going to this housing fund. And, the housing council that is considering what to do and making recommendations for what to do with this funding is a pretty diverse group of individuals who I think potentially could be sympathetic to that issue of regulation. I don't know how much impact they could have on it because that's a policy issue as opposed to a funding issue.
Okay, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so I'm just, again, looking at the language of the bill, providing climate resilient and sustainable housing, improving housing conditions, all that. And I guess, to the bill's author, do you think that it would be worth adding in language that talks about looking at city and state regulation that contributes to the high cost of housing? And wouldn't that be a more significant issue when it comes to affordable housing, because that's what this council's about, than providing climate resilient and sustainable housing? Because again, sustainable housing, to me, I think of, carpets that are made of recycled pop bottles, plastic pop bottles, that sort of thing. And which is, to me, adding, again, more money to the cost of a home. So I'm trying to get a sense of priority here on what this housing fund is going to look at, and therefore what projects they're going to fund, as a priority. And so Representative Hollins, what do you see as more of a priority? Lowering the cost of housing so that people can get into housing, or providing climate resilient and sustainable housing?
So before we get too far out here on this housing amendment, you know, when I look at environmental justice, and, you know, environment is where you live, right? And look at housing, we have some, you know, urban core, I'm sure rural too with lead, that is a big problem in so many homes across the state, you know. So I don't want us to go out too far. I think it's possible that, you know, as we look at this constitutional amendment that needs to go before citizens, is that we also have to negotiate with the Senate, right? And figure out what that looks like and what that means also. So I don't want to get stuck too far or go too far off, because we are really in a times crunch here. And so Representative Hollins, can you give a short answer?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. And thank you, Representative Scott. My short answer is I don't think that these two things have to be mutually exclusive, but I will redirect you to the section that says the council must give priority to projects that build or preserve housing that's affordable to households with incomes at or below 30% of the area median income, which is considered deeply affordable housing, which I think that priority sets pretty clearly where we want the funding to go.
Representative Scott.
My final question, Madam Chair, thank you, is Representative Hollins, do you think regulations as part of this bill should be a consideration for the Housing Fund Council to look at?
Representative Hollins, yes or no?
Ouch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I reject the yes or no question. I would respectfully suggest that that's something that the Housing Fund Council would need to decide.
Okay.
Not the legislature.
Representative Lilly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Hollins, thank you for bringing this forward. I think it's really important that we make an effort to renew this, and it certainly seems like the right time. It finishes the way the clock goes. It's going to finish out, I think, in 24, so it ends faster than we think. So it's good to get it before the ballot, or on the ballot for the voters to decide. I think we, as these councils, I think I was lucky enough to serve in. I think both the members here next to me have served on the council, and I'm looking across. I don't know if, I'm not sure, but I really enjoyed serving on it, and I know they took the vetting of these projects very serious, and they continue to this day. And once, you know, you kind of continue to pay attention to it as a past member, but I think they do a great job. And you know, just so you all know, there's so many more requests every year. It's like bonding, you know, there's they have all these funds, but there's so many more requests and need that's out there for even more money. And a lot of it goes to great projects all over the state, parks and trails and environmental projects. You know, this is our lottery money. You see the TV ads all the time, and they do good work, and maybe we can add some of Garofalo's money to this, or you know, maybe not. The E stuff that won't necessarily get added to it, but anyways, there's you know, there's a lot of neat projects that are done. I think of you know, amazing projects with science efforts with our higher ed institutions all over the state that are done, and I think are really positive things, including our students and working on fresh new ideas for Minnesota. Even I think at Buffalo in Dakota County that was paid for by this. Maybe that is in Representative Garofalo's neighborhood. I don't know, but I hope that we renew this. I appreciate the effort that we're bringing forward. You know, whether it's at the end of session or any time in session, I think it's good. We're still here to do the work of the people, and let's get this before the voters and hopefully renew this.
Okay. Representative Petersburg. And let me just say, we've been on, I think, this bill for at least 35, 40 minutes, and we're gonna get to a vote here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I guess the majority's time usage is not my responsibility here in this committee,
No, it's mine.
okay? So we're gonna discuss this bill the way it needs to be done. And you're absolutely right, that talked about we're in a time constraint here issue. But to Represent Lilly, we're not renewing it. This completely changes a lot of stuff that's going on here with adding housing, increasing the cost. And I guarantee you that this deadline of 2025 has been around for at least 25 years, okay? We've known that the deadline is coming, and to bring it in with less than 5 days left of this session, trying to negotiate a bill of this stature that has this complexity, that is going to go to the public without even us understanding it, is irresponsible for us to actually bring it forward. And it just amazes me that we do this at the last minute, in which we know in the past, it allows us to pass legislation that is not vetted, has many problems, had to be corrected later. And now we're gonna go to the public with this without having that vetted. This is just a bad mistake all the way around, moving it at this time. If we'd had time, it should have gone through various committees the first week of session in order to come to it. Come this late is just irresponsible of all of us. Now, please vote no on this. Let's not move it forward till it's ready.
Representative Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We can't have it both ways with words. I'm hearing that this is going to advance environmental justice, address the environmental crisis that we're in, and then we don't have that in the ballot question. We can't say that it's amorphous and yet it's specific. Like, everyone in the room knows what we're talking about, but if we try to explain what we're gonna talk about, we can't give examples of what it is that we're talking about. Okay, we're in the legislature, so we hear words thrown out like environmental justice, and depending on which side of the aisle you're on, that gives a reaction in your mind and has a list of things. But if we're gonna bring this as a ballot question before the public and say, well, everybody supports this, 70-something% of the people support this, that must be in the Twin Cities, because I guarantee you that if I go anywhere in rural Minnesota and say, this money is gonna be spent on environmental justice, you're gonna get no votes. And I think it's purposeful that that's not in the ballot question. I'm gonna call that out. The difficult thing with amendments in our ballot questions going into constitutional amendments, and we've seen this on things that we like, things that the Democrats like, we form that question in a way that's most palatable to the voter. But what's being proposed in this bill is so fundamentally chosen, so fundamentally distinct for a certain belief system that is not mine. And then it gets put before the people as, we're just gonna clean up rivers and streams, is unconscionable. And so if we're gonna move this forward, and we're gonna have a serious question about whether we use gambling money to spend money on things like this, it needs to be more honest. I agree with Representative Petersburg. It needs to go through committees, it needs to have discussions. It can't just be put in there, oh, we have a ballot question, all because this is gonna go away in a couple of years. We could do the ballot question in 2024 and still accomplish the same thing. So no, this is not something that has to be done this year. I try to be patient with things that make me skeptical around here. This one has my ire up because I don't even believe in the environmental crisis or environmental justice, but I'm supposed to accept it because I get shouted down if I don't. We can't behave this way in the legislature. If we want to have this debate of what environmental justice is, let's have it. Let's have a good long discussion, let's have a good long family fight, whatever we have to do. But to bring in these huge words and then to say, well, the words don't really mean anything, they're just gonna be, we're gonna do the question this way. I'm sorry, that's unacceptable. And it's disappointing that the best I can do is vote no on this bill, because I think so much more needs to be done with this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Hurtas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Hollins. I'm sure that you have good intentions with what you intend to do with this, but I want to thank Representative Miller and Petersburg and Scott for their questions. And I'm particularly troubled with the language that's going to be submitted to the voters for an amendment change. You know, members, it wasn't all that long ago. Well, I guess it was. I guess I'm a little long in the tooth already. But when we had this transportation amendment, constitutional amendment, you know, the language sounded real cool, you know, not more than 60% to roads, not less than 40% to public transit. Well, what did that mean? It means you could spend nothing on roads and 100% on transit. Now we have a bill and submission to voters that talks about all the nice shiny objects about protecting lakes, rivers, and streams and protecting the forest. Oh, that sounds good. How many voters are going to read the whole thing all the way to the end? And then you suddenly realize that this money, 50% of it for that purpose, and the other 50% to the general fund, in which Representative Hollins could come and argue for money for housing from the general fund for this purpose. Now we're changing it from the general fund to a dedicated fund to housing. The submission to the voters should really be, should we make the cost of your housing more expensive so other people's housing isn't? That's really at the core of what Representative Scott was trying to get at. We do so many damn things to make housing expensive in Minnesota, it's pathetic. We're one of 7 states that charges mortgage registration tax and state deed tax. That adds thousands of dollars to housing. I've been in the housing industry my whole life, and every time you turn around, somebody's got their hand out digging in your pocket to make houses more expensive. There's nobody who wants to sell houses more than builders. We want everybody to own a house. But this is just going in the wrong direction. And this just makes a dedicated fund to line the pockets of these other agencies and nonprofits who think they're doing a good job, which they're not. They're not efficient. They don't do a good job. Members, vote no on this. This is ridiculous. And this is just being jammed down at the last minute. Hasn't gotten a due process. I can't support this, and I don't know why any of you should either. Thank you.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will agree with my colleagues. We heard in the amendment that your side adopted into this bill that it was for environmental justice and environmental urgencies and crises, and we have not heard from the author even what that means. So we've got a word salad that's being thrown out there to wave our hands frantically in the air to create a sense of urgency. And we can't even, from the author, define what that means. There is no definition coming from the author. Then Representative Hansen rides in on a white horse to try to deflect the conversation into a different direction and doesn't accomplish the goal there either. So this is meant to, as Representative Miller and others have said, this is not what people are going to want to vote for if this goes on to pass. And I've checked, the Senate does not have this moving forward. It is not going to be what was amended into today. So we've effectively convened the Ways and Means Committee in vain. This is going nowhere. So for that reason, Madam Chair, I would make a motion to lay this on the table and would request a roll call. This is in vain.
Representative Scott.
Madam Chair, I believe the motion to lay on the table is non-negotiable or
Debatable.
Debatable, thank you. It's not negotiable or debatable. And so we have to take the vote.
Okay, since we have on the table from Representative Nash to table this bill, we're gonna go to a vote. Ms. Anna, please take the roll.
Chair Moran.
No.
Moran, no. Vice Chair Olson.
No.
Olson, no. Representative Garofalo.
Yes.
Garofalo, aye. Representative Albright.
No.
Albright, no. Representative Becker-Finn.
No.
Becker-Finn, no. Representative Bernardi.
No.
Bernardi, no. Representative Eklund.
No.
Eklund, no. Representative Hansen.
No.
Hansen, no. Representative Hassan, excuse. Representative Hertas.
Gleefully, yes.
Hertas, aye. Representative Hornstein.
Ornstein, no.
Hornstein, no. Representative Johnson.
Yes.
Johnson, aye. Representative Grisha. Representative Liebling.
Liebling, no.
Liebling, no. Representative Lilly.
Lily, no.
Lilly, no. Representative Mariani.
Mariani, no.
Mariani, no. Representative Markort.
Markort, no.
Markort, no. Representative Miller.
Aye.
Miller, aye. Representative Nash.
Aye.
Nash, aye. Representative Nelson.
Nelson, no.
Nelson, no. Representative Noor.
Noor, no.
Noor, no. Representative O'Neill.
Aye.
O'Neill, aye. Representative Pulaski.
Pulaski, no.
Pulaski, no. Representative Petersburg.
Aye.
Petersburg, aye. Representative Pinto.
Pinto, no.
Pinto, no. Representative Schumacher.
Schumacher, aye.
Schumacher, aye. Representative Schultz.
Schultz, no.
Schultz, no. Representative Scott.
Aye.
Scott, aye. Representative Sundin.
Sundin, no.
Sundin, no. And Representative Kreshaw.
Grisha, aye.
Kreshaw, aye.
Madam Chair.
Who's that speaking?
Madam Chair,
Yes, who's that speaking?
Albright votes yes.
All right, yes.
Albright, aye. Madam Chair, that is 11 ayes and 17 nays.
So there have been 11 ayes and 17 nays. The motion to table the bill does not pass. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Hollins, I do want to thank you for bringing the bill so we can have this conversation. Whether it's fair or not, I think sometimes when we criticize bills, people think that we're attacking or criticizing the author. And I don't know you well enough to be able to give this bill the full-throated opposition I'd like to give it. So I do wish you were here. And if this bill is on the floor, I'd encourage you to be here so that I can have that conversation with you to know that, in the words of Michael Corleone, it's not personal, it's strictly business. So I do want to highlight for members some deficiencies in this proposal. This is supposed to be about clean air and clean water, yet on the first page, lines 1.21 through 1.23, we see that there's actually a prohibition that's written into the bill, and I'll read it. It says, "The assets of the Environmental and Natural Resources Trust Fund shall not be used to pay for any costs related to the construction, repair, improvement, or operation of any facility or system that processes wastewater." So what we have right now in Minnesota, particularly in small rural communities, is that we're having higher federal standards, higher state standards, and mandates requiring a better standards for the effluent that is discharged into our water system. But these communities simply lack the property tax base, they lack the wealth to pay for these new mandates that have come from federal and state government. So in this amendment, we are specifically carving out and prohibiting funding for what is one of the biggest ways we can improve water quality in the state of Minnesota. On top of that, I would highlight to members that the Senate companion to this bill, Senate File 4131, has radically different language than the language that's contained in this bill. We've discussed the changes that are proposed in housing that are not present. There are other factors as well. But members, I do want to highlight, I remember last year in this committee, and I don't remember if I said it publicly or privately, but I highlighted to members that no one was doing anything about this constitutional amendment that was expiring. And I don't know what the advocates were doing, what they were thinking, but it's like sometime earlier this year, I don't know, right about March, they figured out that this constitutional amendment is expiring. And I do think it's important for members to point out that we already have a constitutional dedication for environmental resources. It's in the Legacy Fund. We have that right there. So the idea that we need to have not one, but two separate constitutionally dedicated sources for environmental funding, I think is questionable at best. And I think that the lottery proceeds, however those are dedicated, I do think it's appropriate to have a conversation about what that money, a new source that it could be used for, besides the environment, because legacy is there. But this proposal, specifically with that prohibition in there, not something I'll be supporting, not something I'll be voting in favor of. Certainly will strongly oppose this and encourage my Senate colleagues to do the same. So Madam Chair, I'll be voting no and encourage members of the committee to do the same.
All right, well, thank you, Representative Garofalo, and all that spoke and really took this opportunity to air our insights into this bill. So with that, the motion before us is that House File 4649, as amended, be recommended to be referred to the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. Ms. Anna, please take the roll.
Chair Moran.
Aye.
Moran, aye. Vice Chair Olson.
Aye.
Olson, aye. Representative Garofalo.
No.
Garofalo, no. Representative Albright.
Nope.
Albright, no. Representative Becker-Finn.
Aye.
Becker-Finn, aye. Representative Bernardi. Bernardi, aye. Bernardi, aye. Representative Eklund?
Aye.
Eklund, aye. Representative Hansen?
Aye.
Hansen, aye. Representative Hassan, excuse. Representative Hertas?
No.
Hertas, no. Representative Hornstein?
Aye.
Hornstein, aye. Representative Johnson?
No.
Johnson, no. Representative Kresha? Representative Liebling?
Liebling, aye.
Liebling, aye. Representative Lilly?
Lily, aye.
Lilly, aye. Representative Mariani?
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Representative Markort?
Markwart, aye.
Markort, aye. Representative Miller?
No.
Miller, no. Representative Nash?
Nash, no.
Nash, no. Representative Nelson?
Nelson, aye.
Nelson, aye. Representative Noor?
Yes, aye.
Noor, aye. Representative O'Neill? No. O'Neill, no. Representative Pulaski?
Pulaski, aye.
Pulaski, aye. Representative Petersburg?
No.
Petersburg, no. Representative Pinto?
Pinto, aye.
Pinto, aye. Representative Schumacher?
Schumacher, no.
Schumacher, no. Representative Schultz?
Schultz, aye.
Schultz, aye. Representative Scott? No. Scott, no. Representative Sundin?
Sundin, aye.
Sundin, aye. And Representative Kresha?
Teresa, no.
Kresha, no. Madam Chair, that is 17 ayes and 11 nays.
So there have been 17 ayes and 11 nays. The motion prevails, and House File 4649, as amended, is on its way back to the Rules Committee. So our next bill, and our final bill up, is House File 4850, which modifies the LCCMR. So this bill came to us from the Rules Committee, where they waived Joint Rule 2.03. Chair Hansen, would you like to move House File 4850 to be recommended for placement on the General Register?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move House File 4850 be recommended to the General Register.
And
I have an amendment.
Chair Hansen, you have an author's amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move the A2 amendment to get the bill in the shape I would like.
All right, can you explain your bill? Your amendment,
Madam
I'm
Chair-
sorry. Your
Madam Chair,
amendment.
the A2 amendment delays the implementation date for the change in the LCSMR to January 1 of 2025. That takes it out of the current biennium, and whether the Constitutional Amendment passes in 2022 or 2024, this would revise the structure of the LCCMR.
Okay.
I ask for your support.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the A2 amendment? Seeing no further questions, all those in favor of the A2 amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say
Aye.
nay.
No.
The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. So Chair Hansen, House File 4850 as amended is before us. So please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House File 4850 as amended does what, if you remember during the discussion on LCCMR on the floor, it does what I said it would do. It reforms the LCCMR so it would have 8 legislative members, 2 from each party in each house. They are appointed by their respective caucuses. And then it has 8 citizen members appointed by congressional district with 1 tribal member. So it changes the structure so it is balanced. It would have provision on members being a registered lobbyist if they are citizen members. It changes the terms of the Citizen Selection Committee who makes recommendations, the governor on the citizens. So it's clear that that's 2 years rather than 1 year. There was some confusion about that in existing law. And then it has a requirement for capital project proposal requirements. One of the challenges that's been there for LCCMR in the past several years is that there are capital projects coming in front of the LCCMR rather than going through bonding. So this would require that they go through the same type of vetting by being posted that the capital projects do, and I think it would ensure better integrity of the programs. I would ask for your support.
All right, thank you, Chair Hansen. Members, for your reference, the portion of the fiscal note prepared by House File 4428 dealing with the per diem changes to the LCCMR is in your packet. That is the fiscal component of House File 4850, and it applies here. Are there any questions or comments on the bill? Okay, let's get Representative Petersburg first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the author too. Can you give us a rationale for changing from a majority of legislative representatives on this committee to majority that's appointed by the governor? Again, it seems like we're moving away from legislative authority and really getting to where the governor is controlling a lot of dollars that are appropriated. Can you tell us why you went that direction?
Representative Hansen, Chair Hansen.
Madam Chair and Representative Petersburg, two reasons. One, on the legislative appointees, the members, when there has been a 3-2 split, I think that has actually encouraged more partisanship among the legislative delegation. So having, like other commissions, equal members from both parties in each house, that provides balance. On the citizen members, the current iteration of the LCCMR has one appointee from the legislature from the House, one appointee from the legislature from the Senate. Those members served 4-year terms. And so the rationale, I don't like giving up legislative appointments, but as a hybrid commission where you have executive and legislative branch, having the legislative branch appointments that serve for 4 years doesn't accurately reflect the results of elections. Whereas a gubernatorial election, you have with staggered terms, you can have continuity within the commission, but also have for the opportunity for turnover. With 8 congressional districts, that ensures regional balance as well. Currently, no requirement exists on that. So, and with 17 members to having a tribal member there, that provides the opportunity for our First Nations to have a voice in this recommendation process.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you for that clarification. I will just reiterate my concern of the lateness of this moving forward with this kind of major change in bill proposals. We haven't had a chance really to find out whether or not that's actually true, because I think sometimes having a bipartisan committee works better than having one that's partisan. In this case, I think it's partisan to wherever the governor is. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the reasons that Representative Petersburg outlined and others, I'll be voting no on the bill, but I just want to point out to members that sometimes there's a physical divide between us, and I would just point out that this is how far apart the DFL and Republicans are right now. On the DFL side, the clock on their side of the room says 1 o'clock. The clock on the Republican side says 2 o'clock. So that's how messed up things are. So I'll be voting no, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Well, I tell you, Representative Garofalo, that's been throwing me off all day since I've been in this room. Any further questions?
The appropriate rebuttal, Madam Chair, would have been to say, well, the Republican side is wrong. So that's.
So House File 4850 as amended is before us. Seeing no further discussion. Any closing comments, Chair Hansen, before we take a vote?
Madam Chair, this is a good bill. It provides for needed reform. It was discussed, as terms of my intent. When we were having the debate, we took input on the House floor, got the bill drafted, brought it through committee. We have it here, and we still have time left. We have the opportunity to work every day to get the people's work done. So I'd ask for your support.
All right, thank you, Chair Hansen. So the motion before us is that House File 4850 as amended be recommended to be placed on the general register. Ms. Anna, please take the roll.
Chair Moran.
Aye.
Moran, aye. Vice Chair Olson.
Aye.
Olson, aye. Representative Garofalo.
Garofalo, no.
Garofalo, no. Representative Albright.
Albright, no.
Albright, no. Representative Becker-Finn.
Aye.
Becker-Finn, aye. Representative Bernardi.
Aye.
Bernardi, aye. Representative Eklund.
Aye.
Eklund, aye. Representative Hansen.
Aye.
Hansen, aye. Representative Hassan, excuse. Representative Hertas.
No.
Hertas, no. Representative Hornstein.
Hornstein, aye.
Hornstein, aye. Representative Johnson.
Absolutely not.
Johnson, no. Representative Grisha.
Grisha, no.
Grisha, no. Representative Liebling.
Aye.
Liebling, aye. Representative Lilly.
Lily, aye.
Lilly, aye. Representative Mariani.
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Representative Marcourt.
Markford, aye.
Marcourt, aye. Representative Miller.
No.
Miller, no. Representative Nash.
Nash, no.
Nash, no. Representative Nelson?
Nelson, I.
Nelson, I. Representative Noor? Representative O'Neill?
No.
O'Neill, no. Representative Pulowski?
Pulaski, aye.
Pulowski, aye. Representative Petersburg?
No.
Petersburg, no. Representative Pinto? Representative Schumacher?
Schumacher, no.
Schumacher, no. Representative Schultz?
Schultz, aye.
Schultz, aye. Representative Scott? No. Scott, no. Representative Sundin?
Sundin, aye.
Sundin, aye. Representative Noor? And Representative Pinto? Madam Chair, that is 15 ayes and 11 nays.
All right, there have been 15 ayes and 11 nays.
Pinto, I was having trouble
Pinto's
unmuting,
aye.
sorry.
Pinto, aye. Madam Chair, that is 16 ayes and 11 nays.
So there have been 16 ayes and 11 nays. The motion prevails. House File 4850, as amended, is on its way to the floor. I want to thank you, members. So remember, just want to say that that completes our work for today, but since we're at the end of session where a lot of the final decisions have been made, the Ways and Means Committee can be called back, but we promise to do our best to give you enough time, but it may be relative short notice, but we'll do our best to keep everyone notified as we move forward. And so with that, the meeting is adjourned.